edition of the Bullheaded Podcast. I am your host, per usual, Sean Tyson, here with a couple of my good friends, Zoo and Peebush. How you guys doing?
Doing well, man. Zoo and I just had a nice couple days in Scottsdale, Arizona. But I did just want to open up and say prayers up for Damar Hamlin, man. Sean, I know you were sharing a lot of stuff. Scary sight yesterday. Never like to see that. Just hope he, is able to make a full recovery. And I don't know, man. That's just tough to see, no matter who it is or who's playing. So prayers up for Damar.
Yeah, definitely prayers to him and his family, his teammates, and everyone in that organization. This is completely unexpected because it's not really a football injury. For like a cardiac arrest, that's just something randomly happened, out of the moment. So prayers to him, and hopefully he gets better because guy is young. He's young and he is in his prime of his career, so it's a tough situation for him to be in. Hopefully he fights through it, and I feel like he will because the dude's a gladiator. He's a football player. Those guys are gladiators.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I like to echo those comments as well. Like you say, watching that last night was pretty surreal. Just seeing, when you first see someone get injured, you see someone fall, you just automatically think it's maybe an injury of that sort. And then when it actually comes to fruition, it kind of just makes you think about the bigger thing in life, more so than football. And I kind of just like how ESPN and the people who, I guess, do behind the scenes, people in the truck, all the people who work within the broadcast, how they handle that. And they were first class. And a lot of outrage you saw on Twitter with people, commenting. People are going to do stuff for clicks and things like that. But it's just always cool to know that when you're watching things like that, that people kind of have, for the most part, are on the same train and they understand that this is a serious moment in football. It's the least of our worries. So prayers up to him and his family, and hopefully he makes a full recovery. So with that, bouncing on to week 18, per usual, man, it's just always drama with the NFL. There's certain teams that just won't go away, i.e. the Packers, the Steelers. They just always figure out a way to make themselves relevant in the last week of the season. So I wanted to ask the guys what direction they're going to go with, which storyline in week 18 they're going to go into. And Peebush, I'm going to start with you.
It's tough, man. I'll start in the AFC. I think the Patriots' big win against the Dolphins this past week. I think there was a bit of a controversial play with the delay a game, towards the goal line at the end of the game with the Patriots. But, without Tua, I think the Dolphins, I'm not saying their chances are shot. I know Mike McDaniels. They probably are. But
written off, man. Written off.
All right, Zoo, that's fair. I mean, you got to look at the other options here. Patriots got to go at Buffalo. And, obviously, we were just talking about, kind of uncertain with the Week 17 matchup, the Bills-Bengals from last night, if they're going to end up rescheduling that, how that's going to potentially affect the number one seed, because the Bills are in a fighting chance for that. So if they do end up, beating the Bengals, if they do play that game eventually, and, the Chiefs, falter, I'm not exactly sure who their Week 18 matchup is, but it's not like the Bills could be playing for nothing, right? They could be playing for seeding. So it's not like they think they're just going to roll over against the Patriots. It is a divisional matchup, which can affect seeding, tiebreakers and such. Then you look at the Dolphins. They're playing the Jets. Jets are now out of contention. They could play spoiler. I don't know, man. The Dolphins are struggling, obviously, without Tua. How they were struggling a little bit with Tua towards the end of the season. So I do think the Patriots are probably going to end up pulling out that last wild card spot. I know the Steelers have a fighting chance. I think they do need, both the Dolphins and the Patriots to take L's, and that is possible. They probably have the easiest quote unquote matchup playing against the Browns this week, who are they might be sitting some of their big players, just resting them for next year, making sure they don't get injured. So I do think the Patriots will pull it out somehow. There you go. There's another team, man. They just always seem to be hanging around. Not really that high on them making major noise in the playoffs. Teams have been kind of playing Ramondre Stevenson relatively well lately, and he was pretty much their entire offense. But Mac Jones has been throwing a couple pretty balls, man. Him and Jacoby Myers actually seem to have a decent connection now. But yeah, man, it'd be, Belichick kind of just proving that once again he can somehow bring a team into the playoffs or at least keep them in contention every single year. So happy to see them in it if they do make it. And I'm also happy to hopefully see the Jaguars finally make the playoffs again, man, and bring this franchise to the top of the AFC South. So they just got to get it done against Tennessee.
Man, you know what I'm going to say, man. Aaron Rodgers back in the playoffs, man. Maybe this is the year where there's a role reversal. Usually Aaron Rodgers is a regular season guy, MVPs and MVPs. In the playoffs, he wets the bed. But this season, he's been the exact opposite of an MVP, man. It's been their running game carrying the offense. It's been their running game carrying the offense. Right now, they're doing a 50-50 split right now. So Aaron Rodgers is a game manager.
Yeah, when you think you were gonna when did you ever think you were gonna say that, Zoo?
Like Aaron Rodgers over under passing yards, like 200 something yards right now, because the dude does not throw the ball at all. Like when he throws the ball, it's just not good right now. So Aaron Rodgers is a game manager. That's the offense they want to pick, and maybe in the playoffs this year they actually get it done. So I want to see Aaron Rodgers to beat the Detroit Lions, because come on, you want to see the Detroit Lions? Who wants to see the Detroit Lions? Man, only people from Michigan want to see the Detroit Lions in the playoffs, and you want Aaron Rodgers to get back in the playoffs. Even though I'm betting no money on them at all, $0 on them. I might be a fan, but I will put $0 on them winning a playoff series. But I want to see them in there, and I think the Green Bay Packers story coming back from being absolutely abysmal at the bottom of the division to making it into the playoffs with some nice wins. Actually, that Vikings win, that was impressive. Like, even though Vikings were a little fraudulent, the point differential, that record looking real nice, I have them losing their first playoff series too, man.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
The Vikings, it's a cute team, man. I had them winning the division, man. I had them winning double-digit games, but I'm still not really that impressed with them, man, because they're getting a little lucky in some of these games. So in the playoffs, I feel like, man, just find a way, double team Justin Jefferson, man. Make someone else beat you, man. Like that's the game plan. And the Packers showed you a little blueprint on how to slow down Justin Jeff, even though this dude is still an absolute monster. But the dude let down a lot of teams in fantasy football in a championship week.
Did he?
2 points, man. Jair Alexander backed it up. I'll say that.
That's great. That's crazy. You go from dropping 200 to like 20. Like, that's pretty much what happened. Like that's a mad impressive defensive scheme plan. Shout out to Alexander for the defense. So for me, man, I want to see these Packers to get it done against the Lions. I will be betting on the Packers to get beating the Lions, because I truly believe that they will get the deal done. Like, you don't get this close of almost making it to the playoffs and then losing to the Lions at home. That would be the worst story ever. Especially when Aaron Rodgers said, like, "Oh, don't count us out." All right. Put them in, man. Push them in. Get the deal done, man. Get the deal done.
I think they probably have the easiest path too, right? I think they're winning in based on tiebreakers with Seattle.
They control their own. They control their own destiny.
Yeah,
they were at home, and they're against a Detroit Lions franchise. So get it done, man. No excuses.
And that stinks for the Seahawks, man, just based on how they started the season.
Like I said, cute story, cute story, man. Geno Smith, cute story, cute quarterback, cute team, cute offense, cute story.
Yeah. I mean, and they have an easy matchup this week with the Rams, who are once again really aren't playing for much. They just got worked by the Chargers this past week. If the Lions do somehow pull it off, it's unfortunate that the only way that they can get in is by Seattle losing at home to Los Angeles. I mean, that's just, it's just brutal. They were, the Lions fans, they were all praying for the Packers to take that L last week against the Vikings. And look, the Packers they stuck it to them. I mean, they went out there and won that game 41-17, man, and it should have been 41-7. Let's be honest; those are some garbage time points there at the end. So I also don't know. Does anybody know if Dalvin Cook? I know it looked like he hurt his hand in that game when he planted. I think on an early tackle. I don't think he's ruled out or anything like that. But if that's the case, or he does have to miss a little bit of time, who knows if that'll affect the Vikings as well. But Madison has shown in the years past that he can step in and do the job. But yeah, man, J. Jeff is pretty much their entire team this year.
Offense, completely resolves around Justin Jefferson, and when you shut him down, it shows you how limited they are. And two, that you can kind of, like I said, Justin Jefferson got shut down, but you can put a lot of that blame on Kirk Cousins, because he turned into what a lot of people thought Kirk Cousins is, which is an average quarterback. And it kind of almost makes you feel like this year he's just had parts where he's just been streaky hot. And it's not so much more that's just consistently who he is. It just feels like he's a quarterback that can run hot and cold. And, I know on this, I guess you say podcast, we always kind of want to see like who's a team that can make a quarterback change and who's a franchise that can take the next step and get a quarterback. Well, it's like with Minnesota, they're also kind of in that weird, like, I guess, no man's land, because Kirk Cousins is good, but it's like you don't think he's ever going to take you to the next level. Yeah, and it's like how much of him being great is, and you can say this about a lot of quarterbacks, but it's just like how much of it is tied to Justin Jefferson and the weapons around him, which most quarterbacks they have that luxury, so you can't really pin that on them. But it'll be interesting to see what they do in the playoff. I also have them going out. Whoever they play in the first round, they're probably going to lose. So, and storyline I'm looking at is with the NFC East, and Philadelphia was a classic example with their backup quarterback as being fool's gold. I think when he played Dallas, everybody was like, well, you know what, Gardner, even though he didn't make the play down the stretch, like he is a quarterback that can at least get us a win in the next 2 games that we have on our schedule. And when you saw him go out there and play against a New Orleans team who usually always has a great defense, but still you're at home, you had your performance against Dallas, you're thinking he's going to carry a little bit of that momentum into the next week and secure the division. Well, he did. And he threw a critical pick 6, and now it's got Philadelphia fans wondering, like, is Jalen Hurts actually going to come back this season and at least secure us the number 1 seed? Now, they will be playing the Giants, and the Giants, locked up their playoff spot. So you wonder, are they going to sit a couple of key guys? I don't think they're probably going to sit the quarterback, but they may sit someone like Saquon. They may sit a couple defensive guys, so who knows? But with that being a rivalry game, I don't see them sitting everybody because you still have a little bit of pride. And Dayball being a first-year coach, I keep going back to that. He kind of wants to set the tone of not, feeling like you just want to lay down the rival. So it's going to be pretty interesting because if Philadelphia has to roll Gardner Minshew back out there again against the Giants, I don't care what starters are playing or not playing, I don't have any confidence that they're going to win that game. So I kind of want to see if Jalen Hurts is actually going to be cleared to play. Because I would hate the same thing with Lamar that you see in AFC. I would hate for him to have to come in the playoffs and that be your first start in 3 to 4 weeks. That's a tough ask. Yeah. That's a very tough ask. I don't care who you're playing in the playoffs. That's a very tough ask. And I also kind of have a feeling that Philadelphia is going to need home field advantage. If they don't get the number 1 seed, I don't see them going far in the playoffs. They need to get home field advantage, especially with Jalen Hurts being. I know he played in the playoffs last year, but that was against Brady, and it was on the road, and that was more of a mismatch. But I think for him to get at least to the NFC Championship game and beyond, he needs to be at home. And I think, just with the Philly fans in general, I think that atmosphere could be electric and it could help Philadelphia. So that's a storyline I'm looking into a lot because I kind of want to see Jalen just to see, because I was seeing stuff where they were showing pregame, and you just never know what to take from that stuff. But he's moving around good. His legs wouldn't hurt, and his shoulder looked okay. But it's just like it's different when you're playing real live game reps. So kind of focusing in on that to see if they can get the number 1 seed.
And they need that bye. If he is, still not 100% healthy, giving him that extra week would just be crucial for that team. I don't, obviously we don't know who would come out of that, divisional round and then end up playing. They're playing in the divisional round against the Eagles, but yeah, man, they have a definitive home field advantage in Philly. The massive crowd noise, one of the most obnoxious crowds in the NFL and just in sports in general is Philadelphia. And that will always have a major effect, especially if you can secure that bye. So yeah, it's a good one, Sean. I'm looking for that one too.
Man, and the Eagles, man, this Jalen Hurts injury, man. If he they can't win a game without him right now, man. They can't win a game without him. Like Gardner Minshew, man, he was awful last game, man. Yeah. He was awful against that Saints team. Like 2 losses, like Jalen Hurts gets injured, and then they lose 2 games. Like it's no surprise. Like there's a reason why this guy was in the MVP conversation. Like they might win it. They might not win the game against the Giants next week. Like the Giants, and this is a Giants team. I'm gonna be really interested to see if they actually even try. Because they already got that playoff spot, locked it in.
And I don't think they can move either.
They can't move. Yeah,
exactly. So
it's too top heavy.
So they got no incentive. They already got the job done, got the playoff spot. It's been many, many years. The last time they were in the playoffs, 2016, and then Odell on his boat. That's all I remember. Odell and the Giants on a boat ride, and then they got their butts whipped. That's all I remember. But now they back with Mr. Dayball. Congrats to him. So I'm really interested to see if the Giants even try or move out their starters, or they just rest their entire roster. Because if they rest their entire roster, okay, Gardner Minshew should be able to beat backup players. But if they're actually playing their dudes for the entire game, I don't know if he can get it done, man. I don't think Gardner Minshew can get it done against that Giants defense.
And it's interesting. I'm looking at the playoff picture right now. If everything was to stay the same, Eagles secure the 1 seed, Niners, the Vikings are the 3rd seed. And that first round matchup would be against the Giants.
Giants.
And I would argue that that's probably the team the Vikings would want to play the least, because the Giants are such a great defensive team. They're not that great against the run. Daniel Jones has actually had a hell of a season, man. He's actually progressed. I don't know if y'all saw his turnovers over the past 4 years. They've just been, exponentially going down every single year. I'm not saying he's a top 10 quarterback in the league, but he can get the job done against a team that has been faltering, especially against the run. So we were talking about the Vikings losing their first round matchup. If it's to the New York Giants, man, Jesus, that's all I gotta say.
Yeah, and going back to Green Bay, I was very high on their defense at the beginning of the year, and their defense kind of just sputtered and kind of had some great moments and some not so great moments. But I really just like all three levels of their defense. To me, it feels like they have one of the more complete defenses when it's playing, I guess, on all cylinders. Like when they're firing on all cylinders, they are very tough. And like I say, Jair Alexander, to me, I know he gets his credit with all pros and Pro Bowls with, like, I guess just say the NFL community, but I feel like just social media wise, and I guess more, and that may just be more about branding more than anything, but he's a hell of a corner. And the thing about him, I like about him the most is he's not the prototypical 6'1", 6'2" corner that can run and has length and can cover, a lot of facets of the defensive backfield. He's like 5'10", 5'11", and he's shutting down a lot of elite receivers. He does that a lot. Like, he's probably the one corner out of everybody who has, like you say, he shut down shut down is relative because Justin Jefferson got him in the first matchup, but he did very well against him in the second matchup. And then against Stephon Diggs, like, remember at the beginning of the year, he cooked Jalen Ramsey, and he's been cooking a lot of corners. And Jair actually, when he was matched up with Stephon, did pretty well. Now, Stephon still got his numbers, but to me, I think a lot of people look at the stat line like, well, a certain receiver had like 5 catches for 55, 60 yards. Like, well, he didn't shut them down. It's like, well, if you watch the game and they're getting slant, like, you can't cover a slant. So if you're just getting cheap yards, it doesn't matter. And plus, too, if you're in zone coverage, it doesn't really, that type of coverage doesn't stay on you. So for me, Jair is one of those pound for pound corners. He doesn't get talked about enough, I guess, social media wise. I always try to give him credit because he really does do a lot of talking, like a lot of corners do, but he does back it up. And I think if he continues to be that anchor, like I said that at the beginning of the year, like if he's the anchor on that defense and takes out the time to shut down the number one receiver, I think that's gonna, have a trickle down effect on the defense, and Packers could have a shot. Like you say, it all comes down to the quarterback, but that defense is starting to show up. And, you got Romeo Dobbs back, and you got some other pieces. So we'll see. Aaron Jones going off as usual. And that might be another reason why Aaron's not throwing the ball, because they're running the hell out of the ball right now. So
yeah,
that could be a scenario where if you just maybe take a page out of the 49ers playbook, run the ball and play good defense. Maybe you'll beat the 49ers this year if you do that. Like, if you don't ask Aaron to do everything, maybe you beat them this year. So who knows? But switching gears to our second topic. Shout out to the college football playoff semifinal. Man, like, I don't think I've seen a more entertaining set of games than I did this past weekend. It's just, college football has its moments where it's bowl season, and like I said, a lot of that is just inventory. But when it comes to the playoff games, they're usually pretty good matchups. Now, a lot of the playoff games in the past have been, especially in the semifinal portion, has been kind of snooze fest. But these two playoff games were high scoring, and the fact that the Ohio State kick at the end pretty much landed on midnight was insane to me. Like, that you want to talk about just everything culminating in that moment with college football. It gets no better than that. But moving on, we have, like I kind of hinted to last week, hoping it didn't happen, but it was Georgia and TCU. TCU showed me a lot more so just about their resiliency, because, Michigan did a lot of things in that game that you would say they just kind of gave it to TCU. But if you watch the full game, TCU did battle. Their quarterback played okay, but he didn't play the greatest. But their skill positions and their defense stepped up when they needed to. So they're going into a matchup with Georgia. I think the opening line, at least I saw on CBS, was like -13 Georgia, which to me, I'm not a betting man, but I might jump on TCU to cover that, because they kind of just seem like how Boise was way years ago, how Boise was just that team that came into the bowl season. They were the group of 5, and not saying TCU's group of 5, but like they're the group of 5 team that played Oklahoma and they won on that last play with I think Statue of Liberty play.
Yeah.
Man, it just feels like TCU is destined to make noise in this playoffs and possibly win it. So I want to ask the guys from a betting perspective, which way are they leaning? And Zoo, I'm gonna start with you.
Man. Well, I gotta say, man, I'm a little shocked by that spread, man. 12 and a half. 12 and a half.
Yeah.
Man, wow. Even after that performance, like obviously went with the favorites, man. And Michigan, embarrassment, man. After one quarter, I watched one quarter of that Topgolf, embarrassing. Just absolutely embarrassing. I'm like 14-0. I'm like, game over. Game over, man. Game over, man. Like they had a nice fighting chance, man. They were a little Russian attack, man, but it was embarrassing. Quarterback embarrassing, throwing picks. Running attack, all they do is run the football, man. They put up a good fight, lose at the end. Harbaugh, man, looking for a job back in the NFL already, man. I'm already hearing rumors about him going back to the pro, man. Like I'm already hearing stuff about that. So that's a little sad note to leave on Michigan Wolverine fans, because if you lose your head coach, that program is going to go back down to the drain. Like, it's supposed to be a blue blood school, but not really. It took Harbaugh a couple of years to get into the football playoffs. It ends like that to TCU, which they were the favorites, obviously. So I'm like, man, very, very disappointed in Michigan Wolverines. Very disappointed in Harbaugh's career as a college football coach after this, man. He's a great coach, but man, he just seems to get to the big game and lose. Yeah. Like a lot now. It's like history repeating himself in the pros and repeating itself in college football. And you were the favorites. Like when you're the favorites, you just got to get it done, man. You got to get it done. So TCU being 12 and a half dogs to Georgia, which got pushed to the limit. I didn't see that coming at all. Yeah. Like Ohio State, man. I was very bearish. I was very bearish, man. Like I was not gonna lie, I didn't watch like the whole game at all, man, because I was pretty much dying on my bed in Arizona. I was half asleep. I went to bed at like 8:30 West or Mountain Zone time. So I was pretty much passed out the entire game. But from what I've seen, I was like, hey, it took a last minute field goal for them to get lucky and not make it a lot. Like, come on, Georgia. What happened to that top 10 defense?
Yeah.
I didn't see it. You just look at the score. That's all you got to see. How do you allow that many points? He is an NFL. Mr. Stroud is an NFL quarterback, so I got to give it to him. Like, okay, this guy's a pro. You're playing a bunch of pros on Ohio State with a pro wide receiver, pro quarterback. But
Marvin Harrison, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Tough concussion.
Living up to that name,
lines,
man.
They matter.
Living up to his
lines
name,
matter,
man.
Yeah.
Jeez, man.
Absolutely.
He just seems like a different speed too. Like coming out of high school, he was a highly ranked guy, but he wasn't like the top 10 receiver. But him and Stroud made. I know Marvin, I think, has to come back, but Stroud's gonna, depending on his testing numbers, which is always part of every evaluation when it comes to quarterbacks. He's going to be definitely, I think, he's probably vaulting himself into that top 2, because it wasn't so much just about his play; it was how pinpoint accurate he was. He was on the money, and this was against arguably one of the best defenses in college football. So, yeah, that he made some money. Bryce Young is, everybody's looking at the number 1 pick, but I'll remind you, Bryce Young, I think on the Alabama, I think the guide, he's listed at 5'11", 6 foot, 190. So he's probably 5'10", 185.
Drew Brees.
Yeah, he's probably that. He's like I said, he's a college point guard playing quarterback. His build. Because I wouldn't even want to say he's NBA point guard. Yeah, he's Kimber Walker basically built out there playing and like you said, he can dime throw it too with the best of them, but his measurement's gonna be good. But
so are you taking the cover? You taking TCU?
I'm taking the cover, man. Out of respect, man. Out of respect.
Yeah. I think, and look, I mean, I think just looking at this game in general, I think I made this comment last week, but not the only way TCU was going to win, but the only way Michigan was going to lose was if it became a shootout. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, Duggan, he had that, that nice slant route. Quentin Johnson, dude, that unbelievable. He's another one of the top receivers in the game in college this year. But he did throw 2 picks. I do think that couple iffy referee calls with the placement of the ball there after that pick in I think it might have been in the second quarter. And then when Michigan had that bomb and they got called down at the 1, I mean, you got to punch that in. I know that the Michigan running back fumbled and TCU got the ball back. Not saying that was the momentum killer, but that ended up pretty much deciding the game in the end in the aggregate. So I was impressed by TCU. I read somewhere on CBS Sports today. I can't quote the actual writer, but he said that TCU is Cinderella with brass knuckles, man. So they're playing with house money a little bit, but they are explosive when they can get going. And Sean, I think you mentioned this last week, but the thing about the Georgia defense is I know that they wrecked LSU in the SEC championship game, but LSU put up what 500 passing yards in that game. There are holes in that Georgia defense, and CJ Stroud. He showed exactly how you can do that. And if there's one team that can also match it, it's probably TCU. So, I think that if they were facing Michigan, I think the Georgia pick would be a lot easier. But after seeing what TCU did to Michigan, who also has a pretty good defense, and they also held one of the best rushing teams in the country in Michigan to a poor rushing attack this whole game. I'm not saying that Georgia's, a god at running, but, they always have a great line. They can get some holes open. The interior of Georgia, we always talk about the SEC kind of dominating on the interior on both sides. Jalen Carter, absolute stud on the defensive tackle side. Yeah, man, I'm looking at that spread too. I think, if I was to take TCU in any sense, I'd probably take them to cover. But I'm still probably looking at Georgia to money line here. I just think that the experience is there. Their talent level is ridiculous. Stetson Bennett still had a pretty good game, but that first 3 quarters was just dominated by Ohio State. And then they just kind of choked it there in the fourth. I do got to say, man, I feel bad for the kicker, man. That's a tough field goal to take. He's a 6-year senior. That's his final game of his career.
Yeah. 6 year?
Yeah, yeah. With the COVID year and red shirt, transfer, all that.
Yeah.
Free year. So, tough way to see him go out. I know he was getting a lot of threats and stuff like that. You hate to see that on a college kid. Hell, Sean, to your point, man, if he would have made that on midnight stroke, oh my God. Man, I was waiting in line at a bar, and we could see into the TV, and everybody was just going nuts. It was pretty cool to see. But yeah, man, I think I'm going to take Georgia money line. I just think the experience. They'd be the first back-to-back champs. I think since Bama back in the early 2010s, might have been 2011, 2012. But yeah, I would like to see if TCU pulls this off, though, man. That's probably the greatest upset in college football playoff history.
For sure.
I know you mentioned Boise State. That's probably single-handedly one of the best highlight clips of all time was that pitch play back to tie the game on 4th and 18. Unbelievable. Yeah. Then they go ballsy for the 2-point conversion to run a Statue of Liberty play. I could see TCU needing to pull something out of their hat like that to beat this Georgia team. But once again, I do think that if Georgia gets in another shootout, it could be tough for them to keep up because the TCU defense proved a bit more. I know they gave up 45, but they made some big plays to keep themselves in the game and beating a favorite. So I'm not saying it's a toss-up. I do think that this could be like a 4-point, 5-6 point game, something like that. But I do think Georgia's going to pull it out in the end. So I'm taking Georgia money line.
Michigan also killed themselves with the amount of interceptions they threw. That really messed up their whole trajectory of winning that game because if they don't make those critical, I think one was actually a pick 6. If they don't make those back-breaking mistakes, they might actually be in the college football final playing this game. But like I say, TCU showed up. Like I say, I do think it's kind of disrespectful seeing that it's 12 and a half, 13-point spread. But a lot of that is just based off, how lines work. It's not so much about how you're playing right now. It's just about the averages of especially with college, the amount of talent, star talent you have. And it's the same thing with any sport, just which team has more talent. But Georgia, historically and currently has way more recruits, way bigger base of just talent within their locker room on an average basis, more so than TCU. So I can see why the line is like that. But there's something about a team like TCU who's very hard-nosed. Their quarterback is super, super tough. He just seems, and I know he had a tough semifinal, but he just seems like a guy who's going to be able to not be scared of the moment. So it's like I say, I always am interested in how games start. That's why, with Ohio State, I kind of thought they had a chance because I didn't think they were going to be. I think there was going to be a combination of them not being scared of Georgia because a lot of those guys, quiet as kept, that's on the Ohio State roster are from the South, so they probably already know a bunch of guys from Georgia, and they're not going to be intimidated from a factor of, oh, well, that's just Georgia to have so many 5 stars or 4 stars. So it's we got them over here on Ohio State too, and like you saw what Ohio State did, they came and punched them in the mouth. So I'm interested to see what TCU does because Georgia kind of seems like they're a team that once they get punched in the mouth, they can respond. But TCU, I feel like, is a team that it's just going to be blow for blow. And like you say, if it gets into a shootout, I don't know if I want to side with Georgia because they are very fortunate. On the play again in Ohio State where they kicked the field goal, it ended up being a 52-yarder. But if you go back and watch the plays before that, C.J. Stroud had a huge scramble that got him in the field goal range, and then they kind of stalled out and had to make that 52-yard field goal. And I think if they would have just maybe made some different play calls and got the ball a little bit more centered and maybe got about 8 to 10 more yards, that would have been an easier field goal, and I think he would have made that. And maybe Ohio State would have been in the final. So I kind of feel like if it comes down to a situation where Georgia and TCU are battling and, it's just going to be where you need to be mentally strong. Like plays that need to be made mentally, you're going to make the right play. I think TCU has the team to do that. So, if I'm betting, I would have TCU to cover. I'm looking on the CBS little, I guess you can say, little data line. They got plus 400 for TCU to win it. Like, I kind of like that a lot. Because, like I say, destiny, man, I don't know. It just, like I said, there's a reason why teams don't repeat. And TCU being here, they're here for a reason. They're here for a reason. So, like, plus 400 is very, very enticing on the money line. That's very enticing. So, if I had the extra cash, might lay that down because I don't know if you want to mess with destiny, dog.
Send a $5 to Zoo and he'll place it for you, Sean. And then there you go. You can win a little money. But yeah, man, I just want to say also, based on how Stroud played against Georgia, if Duggan can kind of match that, very interested to see where his draft stock, if it, obviously it'll increase. I'm not saying he'll be top 5 or anything like that. I don't think he's at that level.
He could be a second day pick maybe if he plays really, really well.
Exactly. But I think that this is his opportunity to kind of do what Stroud did and really prove that, I could be maybe a starter eventually, start as a backup somewhere and just kind of progress. But yeah, man, I'm kind of hyped. I'd like to see an upset. It's always fun to see that, especially in college.
Me too. Yeah.
Thanks. Vegas, man, only giving TCU a 20% chance of winning, man. That was interesting. I didn't know it was plus 400, man. That's really interesting, man. Yeah. Sean, man, place a bet, man. 20% chance. If you got TCU over 20%, you smash it, man.
I might have to, bro.
Probability.
It's the destiny. It's the destiny, man. It's, to me, TCU is here for a reason. Like I say, I wanted Michigan, Ohio State. Actually thought that when I was watching Michigan at certain parts of the game that, okay, we're going to get it. And then they lost. And then Ohio State plays. It's like, well, it didn't come out exactly how I wanted. But now that TCU is there, and maybe the football gods heard a little bit of the disrespect I said last podcast, saying that they were kind of a non-blue blood, which I still stand by that. But they win the championship here. They are definitely one of the bigger blue bloods in Texas, because you got to think about, when you think about football just in the state of Texas and around Texas, like Oklahoma, Texas, Texas Tech. I mean, I can't think of it. Texas A&M. Like, there's a lot of big money schools that would die to be in a college football final, including Texas. And the fact that Baylor's another one, and the fact that TCU could be in a championship game and actually win that game. You want to talk about bragging rights in the state of Texas? Like, yeah, because like I say, Texas had one since 2008. So Oklahoma had, I think Oklahoma had one since 2000 maybe. So yeah, this is a huge game for a lot of things. It's an underdog story. It's bragging rights in the state of Texas. Like, I think the world will want to see TCU, and I think it would be cool for college football because then it shows you that a school that doesn't normally recruit, because then they have this thing called the blue chip ratio in college football where they talk about you got to recruit at a certain level. You got to have a certain level of recruits that are the blue chip level, which is usually 4 stars and above. If you don't have a certain number, which I don't know the number, but it's a certain number on your roster, there's no way you can win the national championship. If TCU wins this, that's getting thrown out the window. Because, part of the reason why is because of the transfer portal. Because now you get that 1 free year, and a lot of teams that have guys that wash out at other programs that may be kind of on that 3 to 4.5 star range where they kind of feel like they should be on the field and they transfer to another program. That kind of levels the playing field. So it's going to be an interesting case study, because a lot of people are, and this is a lot of college football talk, but a lot of people are kind of debating like, okay, well, can you win a championship with the transfer portal? And it's like, well, maybe you can have a bunch of high school guys who are developmental guys in that 3 to 4 star range that will be great for your program. And you can get a lot of transfer guys who are, I wouldn't say bad apples at other programs, but maybe they're just not seeing the field and they want a fresh start to show their talent. So that could be, if that formula, is a good recipe and TCU ends up winning, it's going to change high school recruiting a lot, especially with scholarships. So that could be another podcast. I can talk about that all day.
That's far enough, Rebel.
But shout out to TCU and Georgia. We're going to see how you guys do. And shout out to Week 18 in the NFL, man. It's going to be a lot of storylines we'll be talking about next week when it comes to the playoffs. So you guys tune in to the bullheaded_pod page on Instagram. Make sure you tune into our TikTok page, bullheaded864, YouTube shorts, same thing, all kind of video content, spread them out on all social medias. Same thing with our viewership with the listening podcast. Make sure you Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, the whole nine. And for me, Zoo, and P. Bush, we are out.